लास्ट टॉपिक जो मैं डिस्कस कर रहा था दैट वाज इन्फ्लेशन टारगेटिंग विच इज़ द न्यू फ्रेमवर्क ऑफ मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी, राइट? And we have discussed the first five important provisions of this new framework, and we are left with only one that needs to be discussed right now, and then we'll be starting new chapter, inflation. नहीं, third and fourth point हो गया था, I think. The fourth point, fourth or fifth point has been completed. Five points have been completed, and there is one point more left with this provision of inflation targeting that I will discuss right now, and then we'll be starting a new chapter, inflation. ठीक है? So please write it down. The next point. नहीं, 2 पॉइंट्स ये कह रही, 2 पॉइंट से मैंने लिखवाया था, ऐसा है क्या? दिखाना. नहीं, ये सारे पॉइंट्स हो चुके हैं. फर्स्ट पॉइंट की मतलब, हाँ जी, 5 कंप्लीट हो चुके हैं. ठीक है, वही मैं बोल रहा था आपसे. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट जो है इसमें लिखेंगे आप लोग, प्लीज राइट इट डाउन. द नेक्स्ट इंपॉर्टेंट प्रोविजन ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन टारगेटिंग, लिखिएगा आप लोग, प्लीज राइट इट डाउन. अंडर इन्फ्लेशन टारगेटिंग, अंडर इन्फ्लेशन टारगेटिंग, अंडर इन्फ्लेशन टारगेटिंग, कॉमा दीजिए. in order to in order to in order to decide about in order to decide about policy rates, in order to decide about policy rates, a monetary policy committee, a monetary policy committee, in order to decide policy rates, a monetary policy committee has been constituted. Committee has been constituted. This committee consists of 6 members. This committee consists of 6 members. 3 from रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया. 6 मेंबर्स के बाद आप डैश देंगे, डैश देकर लिखिएगा दिस कमेटी कंसिस्ट ऑफ 6 मेंबर्स, डैश दीजिए. देन लिखिए 3 मेंबर्स आर नॉमिनेटेड बाय गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया. अच्छा, आपने लिखा 3 मेंबर्स आर फ्रॉम रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया इंक्लूडिंग आरबीआई गवर्नर. लिखिए 3 members are from Reserve Bank of India including RBI's governor, and remaining 3 members are nominated by Government of India. Nominated by Government of India for a duration of 4 years. For a duration of 4 years. ठीक है, so this is something very different from what we had before 2016. You must be knowing that before 2016 it was the governor of Reserve Bank of India that used to decide about all the policy rates. When we talk of policy rates, it consists of all the quantitative rates that are used by Reserve Bank of India under its monetary policy. We have the bank rate, CRR, SLR, then repo rate and reverse repo rate. All these rates are called policy rate. The most important being the repo rate. And before 2016, it was the governor of Reserve Bank of India. It was the governor of Reserve Bank of India that used to decide all these policy rates, right? It was in the exclusive domain of the governor of Reserve Bank of India. इसको ऑफ करना यार, इसको ऑफ कर दो, इसको ऑफ कीजिए आकाश, देखिए उसको, उस फैन को भी ऑफ कीजिए पीछे, उसको भी ऑफ कीजिए. ठीक है ना, ऐसे ही तो चल रहा है ना. But now there has been a big change in this provision, as you can see that now in order to decide about all these policy rates, a committee consisting of 6 members has been appointed by Government of India. 3 members will come from the Reserve Bank of India, including the RBI's governor, and 3 will be nominated by Government of India. These 6 members will now decide about all these policy rates, right? And a team of these 6 members is called Monetary Policy Committee. This committee will decide all these policy rates. So the implication of this provision is that now under new framework of monetary policy, the power of governor has been diluted. You can see, है ना? The power of governor has been diluted. But the practice that we have adopted right now is in the best line of practices adopted worldwide. Everywhere, in every developed countries, you will find that all these policy rates are not decided by only one person. Rather, we have a committee, we have a team that decide about all these policy rates. Like in America, we have the central bank, and in that central bank, there is a committee which is called FOMC, Federal Open Market Committee, consisting of 20 members there, right? And out of those 20 members, 10 members have been given the responsibility of deciding policy rates in America, right? So in most of the advanced countries, this is the practice that all these sensitive policy rates are decided by a group of people, not by a single individual. And that is what we have adopted under the new framework of monetary policy, right? It's better to depend upon the economic wisdom of 6 person than to depend on economic wisdom of only 1 person, right? So it is in the best line of practices worldwide. So 6 members monetary policy committee will decide policy rates. Okay? One of the members will be, of course, Reserve Bank of India's governor. 3 members are nominated for a duration of 4 years by the Government of India. Every 4 years of time, there will be new members nominated by Government of India, right? So since 2016 onwards, October 2016 onwards, policy rates are decided by this monetary policy committee, and this committee, hold the meetings every 2 months of time. That means the committee, hold the meeting at least once in every 2 months. So we start our financial year in the month of April, right? We start from 1st of April and the financial year remains in force till 31st of March, right? 31st of March. So first MPC meeting is held in the month of April. It was held, held this time on 5th to 7th of April, right? So the next one will be after 2 months of time, right? Next will be after 2 months of time in the month of June, then in August, then in October, then in December, then in February. You can see that every 2 months of time the meeting is being held by this monetary policy committee, and in this particular meeting decision about policy rates are being taken, whether they have to be increased or they have to be reduced or they needs to be left unchanged. That is decided by all these 6 members under monetary policy committee, right? So we have 6 meetings of MPC. Since meeting is held every 2 months of time, we have 6 meeting in a single year of this MPC, in which the decision about policy rates are taken, right? But it's not mandatory for the monetary policy committee to decide about the policy rates just in the official dates of MPC's meeting, right? Even outside the official date of meeting, the policy rates can be increased or decreased. It depends upon what kind of situation we have, right? Like we have already held this meeting of April, and the next meeting is expected in the month of June. But let's suppose in the meanwhile inflation increases significantly, and that requires the Reserve Bank of India to increase the repo rate. So this committee will not wait till the month of June. This decision on increase of repo rate can be taken even before the official meeting of monetary policy committee. But usually what happens, the policy rates are decided upon by the monetary policy committee in the official meeting of this particular committee. Got it? So this one. Now you can see that this committee consists of 6 members, है ना, 6 members. So there is possibility that the decision, or there is possibility that there is the situation of committee being evenly split on any policy decision, right? 3 members will be one side of the decision and 3 others will be another side of the decisions. So this is called the situation of tie, right? There could be a situation of tie in this monetary policy committee. Let's suppose 3 members are saying that we have to increase repo rate, right? And 3 are saying that no, we don't have to increase or decrease repo rate, that must be unchanged, right? So you can see that this committee has been evenly divided over the policy matters. 3 are saying that we have to increase the repo rate, and 3 are saying that no, we have to maintain the status quo, we don't have to increase or decrease the repo rate. In this situation of tie between all these members, what needs to be do, and how this tie is going to be broken? Usually what happens, decisions are based on the decision of majority. We have 6 members, so the decision on policy rates will be the decision of majority of members, right? Like if 4 persons are saying that no, we have to increase the repo rate, and 2 are saying that we have to decrease repo rate, or there has to be status quo, right? So the decision taken by 4 members will be accepted and repo rate will be increased. It is on the basis of consensus of majority that we take the decision on policy rates. But possibility is that since committee consists of 6 members, possibility is that there is the situation of tie among them, right? That means 3 members are on the one side of the decision and 3 are on the other side of the decision. And in order to break the tie, the governor of Reserve Bank of India has been given an extra vote, right? This is called casting vote. So casting vote is lying with governor of Reserve Bank of India. This is called casting vote or extra vote. And the governor will exercise this extra vote only when there is the situation of tie in the committee, not before that, right? Are you getting my point? But governor of Reserve Bank of India is not having the veto power. He is having this casting or extra vote, but he is not having the veto power. And this statement can be asked as questions, whether the Reserve Bank of India is under new framework of monetary policy exercise veto power or not, right? So this is incorrect. The governor of Reserve Bank of India does not exercise any veto power under new framework of monetary policy. He is having just the casting or extra vote that he will exercise when there is the situation of tie in the monetary policy committee. What do you mean by veto power? Have you heard of this veto power somewhere? Where? Yes, veto power. Yes, in United States, all the 5 members of Security Council, है ना? 5 permanent members of Security Council enjoy this veto power. What is that? A grade. Hmm. Okay, fine. So basically, veto power means the power to override the decisions taken by other members, right? The decision, sorry, veto power means the power to cancel the decision taken by other members, even though they are in majority, right? Like we six members are having the veto power, right? And five of you, let's suppose, have taken a decision. I am also having the veto power. So what I can do is to cancel the decisions taken by you five people altogether, right? Or any one of us will have this veto power. So any one of us will have the right to cancel the decision or override the decision taken by all other five members, right? Like China was recently, in recent past, China was exercising this veto power in United Nations, right? You may have heard of one terrorist from Pakistan that we wanted to, brand him as international terrorist, right? So Russia, France, everybody, every five members of Security Council was in favor of designate that person as international terrorist. But China was, China was using its veto power, and and you know as a result of this, that person was not being designated as international terrorist, right? So it simply means the power to cancel the decisions taken by all other members. That power is not there with the governor of Reserve Bank of India. He cannot, cancel the decisions taken by majority members, right? Even though Reserve Bank of India is governor sitting here, let's suppose he is in this two people, right? And majority has been on other side of the decisions. So RBI's governor will not have the power to cancel the decision of majority. He will have to go with the majority, and on the basis of consensus of majority, that decision on policy rates are taken, right? You got this provision? Yes. So this is our new framework of monetary policy, and here the monetary policy of Reserve Bank of India's main objective is to ensure the stability of price, to control inflation, and that is why the nomenclature is inflation targeting. Here Reserve Bank of India target inflation given by it by the government of India, and the right now target is between 2 to 6%. That is what Reserve Bank of India is trying to contain inflation within 2% to 6%, right? So we are done with this chapter. This was on monetary policy, and we have discussed the new framework of monetary policy in which Reserve Bank of India's clear-cut mandate is to control inflation, right? So our focus is on controlling of inflation. Until and unless we control inflation, we cannot give the benefits of growth to each and every individuals. Let's suppose we have the growth in the economy, the income of people are increasing, but simultaneously if there is inflation in the economy, there is no benefits of having growth in the economy. All the benefits will be eroded as a result of this inflation. So if we want to provide benefits of growth to people, we have to ensure that price remain moderate in the economy, we control inflation, and that is why the entire focus has been shifted onto the controlling of inflation. So next chapter is on inflation, right? This is our third chapter, and in this chapter we'll discuss every nitty-gritty of inflation, like what is inflation, various types of inflation, causes of inflation, classification of inflation. We'll see everything related to this particular topic, which is called inflation. है ना? लिखो. Inflation. We'll see the meaning and measurement of inflation. The next one is economic effects of inflation. Economic effects of inflation. Then we'll have the classification of inflation. Various classification of inflation. Then we'll discuss various price indices. Price indices like WPI, wholesale price index, and CPI. Then methods of controlling inflation. Methods of controlling inflation. And at last, we'll discuss Phillips curve, and stagflation. Stagflation. These are our topics. Please write it down, everyone. We'll discuss all these topics under inflation. We'll see the meaning of inflation and how we make the measurement of rate of inflation. What is the formula of calculation of rate of inflation? We'll discuss here in this topic. Then we'll see various economic effects of inflation. Then classification of inflation. Then we'll see two different kinds of price indices. This is the plural form of index. We say price index, and this is the plural form of index. Price indices. We'll discuss two kinds of indices. One is wholesale price index and second one is CPI, consumer price index. Then methods of controlling of inflation. Then two important topics that are related to each other: Phillips curve and stagflation. Phillips curve and stagflation. So first we'll see how we define inflation. What we mean by inflation. Inflation is always associated with the situation when prices of goods and services start increasing, right? When we find that prices of some goods and services are increasing in the economy, we call this situation as the situation of inflation. And in fact, this is how lay person define the concept of inflation. Every time there is increase in some individual prices, or the prices of some individual goods and services are increased, those lay person define it as the situation of inflation. But this is not exactly how we have to define inflation. In fact, inflation is not the increase in prices of individual goods and services. Don't think that when prices of individual goods and services are increasing, that could be the necessarily the situation of inflation. Let's suppose you find that prices of marker are increasing, you find that prices of fan are increasing, you find that prices of camera projector are increasing, right? But you cannot call this situation as the situation of inflation. On the basis of prices of individual goods and services, we cannot define whether the situation is inflationary or not. Then on what basis we have to define? What is the basis of inflation? When inflation occurs in the economy, inflation is not the increase in prices of some or group of goods and services, right? Rather, inflation is a continuous increase in average price of some goods and services, right? Whether we have the inflation or not, in order to know that, we look at the average price of some goods and services, rather to look at the prices of individual commodities, right? Rather to look at the prices of individual commodity, we look at what is happening to the average price of some goods and services. For example, let's suppose in order to make the calculation of inflation in our country, we take into consideration prices of 500 goods and services. Let's suppose these are the 500 goods and services that we use in order to fulfill our needs, right? So whether we have inflation or not, in order to know that, we look at the average price of these 500 goods and services. We'll not look at the individual price, we'll look at the average price, right? And if we find that average price has increased over the last 1 year, we'll call this situation as the situation of inflation. So let's suppose we are interested to find out the rate of inflation in the month of April 2022, right? This month we want to know whether we have inflation or not, right? So what we do, we'll find out the average price of these 500 goods and services. We know how to find out the average price, right? These 500 goods and services will have their respective prices, है ना? Some will be of 5 rupees, others will be of 10 rupees, 100 rupees, 500 rupees. They will have their respective prices. We'll add them together and divide by how much? By 500. We'll get the average price, right? So let's suppose average price is 105 rupees. This is the average price. And then we'll compare this average price with one that was prevailing last year, April 2021. So let's suppose in April 2021, the average price of the same 500 goods and services was just 100 rupees. Now you can see that over the last 1 year, average price has increased from 100 rupees to 105 rupees. This increase in average price is called inflation, right? This increase in average price is called inflation. So inflation refers to a persistent increase in, persistent means continuous, है ना? A persistent increase in average price is called inflation. A persistent increase in average price is called inflation. This is how we define inflation, and this is how we have to look at inflation, right? We will not see what is happening to the individual price of some goods and services. Rather, we'll see what is happening to the aggregate price. Average price is the aggregate price. We'll see what is happening to the aggregate price, and on that basis we'll define whether the situation is inflationary or not, right? But you know, if as compared to last year, price would have been reduced, like last year average price was 100 and this year average price is, let's suppose, 95 rupees. So this is the situation of deflation, which is just opposite to inflation. In inflation, average price increases, and in deflation, average prices, reduces. This is what we mean by inflation and deflation. You got this? So my question is, if we have inflation in the economy, will there be reduction in prices of some commodities or not? Is it possible that prices of some commodity will decline or not? At the time of inflation, what I'm asking, whether prices of some commodities may decrease or not. Yeah, average price will increase. What I'm saying is that we have the inflation. That means average price has increased as compared to last year. But that doesn't mean that individual price has also increased. Right? This is the average price. Possibility is that while prices of some of the goods and services would have increased and prices of others may have reduced. But on an average, prices have increased, right? So even at the time of inflation, possibility is that prices of some goods and services may decline, right? Prices of some goods and services may decline. This is possibility. Like even today, when we have inflation to the extent of 15% WPI and 7% CPI, we find that prices of some goods and services in the economy is on decline. This is possibility, right? But what is happening on an average? This is what we have to look at. On an average, we find that prices have increased over the past 1 year, so the situation is inflationary, right? And equally important thing to note is that even at the time of deflation, you'll find that prices of some goods and services may increase, right? We may have the deflation, that means average prices are plummeting as compared to last year, but there is possibility that prices of some individual goods and services may increase at the time of deflation, right? And that is why we do not come to the conclusion about inflation or deflation looking at the individual prices, right? Individual price will not help you understand whether the situation is inflationary or deflationary, and that is why we look at what is happening to the average price. So increase in average price is what we call inflation, and decrease in average price is just opposite of inflation, which is called deflation in the economy. ठीक है, आया समझ में आप लोग को? मंजोत, मंजोत और कौन है यार? ठीक है. Now we'll see how we make the measurement of rate of inflation. यहाँ पे आप लोग बता सकते हैं what is the rate of inflation? It's 5%, है ना? It's 5%. And how you calculate this rate of inflation? Okay, fine. This is 277 and this is 173. What is the rate of inflation? ठीक है, कैसे आप कर रहे हैं? न्यू कहाँ? 104 कहाँ लिखा मैंने? अच्छा, दिस माइनस दिस. ओके, ठीक है, वेरी गुड, है ना? So in order to find out rate of inflation, we use this formula. This is rate of inflation. Rate of inflation is equal to P1 minus P0 on P0 multiplied with 100. ठीक है? We use this formula to find out the rate of inflation prevailing in the economy. P1 minus P0 upon P0 multiplied with 100. लिखिए इसे, लिखिए. Rate of inflation equals to P1 minus P0 upon P0 multiplied with 100. First look at this ratio. This ratio has been multiplied with 100. This is because inflation is always expressed in percentage form. Like we say 5% inflation, that means average price has increased by 5%, right? So since inflation is always expressed in percentage form, this ratio has to be multiplied with 100, right? And in this ratio, P1 is the price index of current year, है ना? P1 is price index of current year in which we calculate the inflation, right? This is the price index of current year in which we calculate the inflation, and price index of current year is the proxy of average price of current year, है ना? It is the proxy of average price of current year. Then P0 is the price index of last year. P0 is the price index of last year, and it is the proxy of average price of last year. We represent the average price of last year using P0, and with P1 we represent the price index or average price of current year. Now you put the formula, put the value in this formula. Like here, this is P1 is equal to 105, P0 is 100. In the first one, this one, 105 upon 100 upon 100 multiplied with 100, right? This is 5%. Inflation is 5%. So simple to look at. Look here, है ना? Price has increased by 5%, है ना? Over the past 1 year. This is what we mean by rate of inflation, and we use this formula to find out the rate of inflation. Is that clear? Now we'll discuss various economic effects of inflation. Please write it down. Economic effects of inflation. Economic effects of inflation. First, we'll discuss internal economic effects of inflation. Internal economic effects of inflation. Internal effects. So, I mean, the economy that will have the inflation will be affected in a variety of ways. We'll discuss all the economic effects only. We are not going to discuss the cultural and social impact of inflation. that is subject matter of something else, that is not the subject matter of economics. And here we are concerned with how the economy and its people are impacted by the pangs of inflation. That's what I'm going to explain to you, है ना? So the most adverse impact of inflation is that it erodes purchasing power of money. The first point, inflation erodes purchasing power of money. Purchasing power of money. Inflation erodes purchasing power of money. Purchasing power of money is also called value of money. Value of money. है ना? So there is erosion of value of money as a result of inflation in the economy. So is that good or bad for us? It's not good, huh? It's bad. It's bad for the economy and its people. So how this leads to erosion of purchasing power of money as a result of inflation? How this happens? Let's suppose you have 100 rupees, right? And you use this money to the purchase of a commodity X, and this price of X is 10 rupees per unit. So with the help of this 100 rupees, how many units you can purchase? You can purchase 10 units, right? So this is the purchasing power of 100 rupees, right, at this price. And now let's suppose there is inflation in the economy and price of commodity increases from 10 rupees per unit to 20 rupees per unit. Now you can see. Now with the help of this 100 rupees, how many units you can purchase? You can purchase only 5 units. Let's suppose there is further inflation in the economy and price of X further increases to 50 rupees per unit. Now you can see that with this 100 rupees, you can purchase only 2 units. What do you find? You find that as we have inflation in the economy, purchasing power of this unit of money keeps on declining. Initially, it was buying you 10 units, but right now this is buying you only 2 units, right? So value or purchasing power of money that we have at our disposal will decline as we have the situation of inflation in the economy, and that leaves or makes people poorer than before, right? When we have the erosion of purchasing power of money as a result of inflation, we become poorer than before. Let's suppose this is our total income, 100 rupees. So we have become poorer than before as a result of inflation. Initially this was capable of purchasing 10 units of commodity, but right now this is capable of purchasing only 2 units of commodity, right? That means now people of the economy have become poorer as a result of inflation. So erosion of purchasing power means that people become poorer as a result of inflation, right? And which group of people are going to be impacted the most? Yes, it is the poorer segment of society, or those people who have fixed income, right? Because your income is fixed and you have the pangs of inflation, right? So you find that the value of your money will keep on declining as a result of inflation. So this is the fixed income group and the poor segment of our society that would be impacted the most as a result of this factor of inflation, right? ये सबसे ज़्यादा एडवर्स है. इसको थोड़ा मैथमेटिकली मैं बता दूं आपको. यू कैन सी दैट मैं बोल रहा हूं कि परचेजिंग पावर ऑफ मनी इज ऑल्सो कॉल्ड वैल्यू ऑफ मनी, है ना? दिस वैल्यू ऑफ मनी, एंड दिस वैल्यू ऑफ मनी इज inversely related to the level of price in the economy. So you can say that value of money is the reciprocal of price level in the economy. Price, है ना? This is our purchasing power of money, or this is value of money. What you find, this is inversely related to price level in the economy. Lower the price in the economy, more is the value of money, right? and vice versa. That means if prices in the economy increases, we'll find that there would be decline in the value of money or purchasing power of money. This is exactly what happens at the time of inflation. This increases, price in the economy increases, and that brings down the value of money or purchasing power of money, making people of economy poorer than before, right? आ गया समझ में? What else? और क्या होता है? इन्फ्लेशन की वजह से आर कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर इंक्रीजेस, आर कंजम्पशन एक्सपेंडिचर इंक्रीजेस एज ए रिजल्ट ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन, है ना? You know what we mean by consumption expenditure? What kind of expenditure is this? बोलिए, आप लोग भी कुछ बोलिए. What do you mean by consumption expenditure? हम्म ठीक है, सही है. I mean, the money that we spend on the purchase of goods and services in order to fulfill our needs, है ना? The money that we spend in order to fulfill our requirement or needs, that is what we mean by consumption expenditure. Like we consume food grains, then we consume, I mean, other articles like, you know, clothes, then we take medicines, then we take services of teachers, services of doctors, right? So our expenditure on all these basic needs is referred to as our consumption expenditure, which will increase as a result of inflation. We'll have to spend more on the, you know, basic needs of life. And how this happens? This happens because, you know, prices of every article in the economy, most of the article in the economy increases as a result of inflation. And we take this example once again. Look, here 100 rupees is being spent on the purchase of X. Price of X is 10 rupees per unit, and the requirement of your family for this X is 10 units. So you were purchasing 10 units of this commodity, and this is what how much you need, right? You need 10 units for your family. Let's suppose now there is inflation and price of this commodity increases from 10 rupees to 20 rupees per unit, right? So still you will have to purchase 10 units of this commodity, since the requirement of your family for X is 10 units. But how much now you'll have to spend here? You will have to spend 200 rupees, because price per unit is 20 and your requirement is that of 10 units. Now you will have to spend 200 rupees. So you can see that as a result of this inflation, your consumption expenditure on X commodity has increased from 100 rupees to how much? 200 rupees. And this is simply because the thing has become expensive than before. Since the thing has become expensive than before, you're spending more than before on that commodity, as a result of which we find that consumption expenditure in the economy will increase. And when this happens, when our consumption expenditure increases, our saving will come down. Our saving will come down as a result of this increase in consumption expenditure. So you can write it down that domestic savings reduces as a result of inflation. Domestic savings reduce as a result of inflation. As a result of inflation. In economics, we denote our aggregate income by capital Y. And in a very simple economy, having no government, let's suppose we divide our income between consumption expenditure and savings, right? This is how we divide our income. Whatever we earn, we spend them on consumption expenditure, and leftover amount is our savings. So here saving is equal to what? Y minus C. And this is how we define the concept of savings. It is leftover income after consumption expenditure. है ना? Saving is what? This is our leftover income, or after, this is our leftover income after consumption expenditure. Now you can see that if our income is fixed, and we have seen that as a result of inflation, consumption expenditure increases. है ना? So Y remaining constant, if C increases as a result of inflation, this is going to bring down our savings in the economy. है ना? And it's not only the savings of some individuals will decline, it is the savings of entire population that will decline as a result of inflation, right? Because everybody is getting affected. You are being affected, I am also being affected, right? Your consumption expenditure has increased, so does mine, right? So our savings will decline in the economy. Domestic savings will come down. And this is not good for the economy, because savings are considered, considered to be useful resources that we require in order to make investment in the economy. What happens that when we, just save our money, we save our money with the banking system. We put our money with banking system, right? And banks, provide those resources to our producers, to investors, right, by way of loan or credit. And those producers and investors, invest those money in the economy. They open the factory, they open the plants here, and that creates jobs, that increases our GDP, right? So it is by the dint of resources that we are having in our banking system, we make investment. More the resources, more the ability is investment. Less the resources, less is the ability of investment. So what we find here, we find that as a result of inflation, our domestic saving will decline, and that will impair the capacity of commercial bank to provide loans, है ना? And once the capacity of commercial bank is affected to provide the loans in the economy, that will completely turn the situation of investment will become less than before, and that's going to cripple the creation of jobs in our country. Employment will go down, so will our GDP, right? So there could be the situation of recession after this higher rate of inflation prevailing in the economy. आप लोग को समझ में आ रहा क्या मैं बोल रहा हूँ? आप लोग ऑनलाइन वाले बच्चे बताएं, ये पॉइंट क्लियर है? ठीक है, तो इसके बाद का पॉइंट आप लोग लिख लेंगे, डोमेस्टिक सेविंग्स कम हो रहा ना, तो ये किसको इंपैक्ट करेगा? इन्वेस्टमेंट को, है ना? इन्वेस्टमेंट डिक्लाइंस लिख सकते हैं आप लोग, इन्वेस्टमेंट डिक्लाइंस एज इन्फ्लेशन इंक्रीजेज। देखिए बहुत सारे इकोनॉमिक्स जो है ना इस पॉइंट पे अग्री नहीं करेंगे। उनका मानना है कि जब इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ता है ना तो इन्वेस्टमेंट भी बढ़ता है, इन्फ्लेशन बढ़ेगा तो इन्वेस्टमेंट भी बढ़ेगा, और ये भी सही है, ठीक है। इनिशियली ये होगा कि इफ वी हैव इन्फ्लेशन इन द इकोनॉमी दैट विल इंसेंटिवाइज सम ऑफ द प्रोड्यूसर्स लुकिंग एट increased price, they will try to make more investment in the greed of more profits, right? But eventually what will happen when inflation increases significantly in the economy, and that brings down domestic savings with the banking system, that will completely cripple the ability of commercial bank to provide the loan. So at aggregate level जो है investment will come down. मैं आपको कह रहा हूँ कि investment जो है ना inflation के साथ कैसे link है आप समझिए, है ना? Sometimes you find that when there is inflation there is more investment in the economy, and sometimes you find that investment declines when we have inflation in the economy. ठीक है, ये जो होता है ना इंडिविजुअल लेवल में होता है ये कि investment increases with increase in inflation. And how this happens? Like let's suppose you are an investor and you want to take the advantage of inflation. Prices are increasing, right? So you would like to reap the benefits of this increase in price, and for that reasons you will make more investment. You will produce more goods and services, and for that reasons you may open new factory, new plant, right? So that is on the basis of a individual producers or investors. Now look at what happens to the aggregate investment in the economy. Aggregate investment depends upon how much resources are lying there with the banking system, right? We find that as a result of inflation, resources will decline with the banking system, and that impairs the capacity of commercial bank to provide loans to producers and investors. So ultimately what we will find, that will impact the aggregate investment in the economy, है ना? So this happens that at aggregate level investment comes down as a result of inflation. ठीक है, आगे समझ में? And then finally the last point, please write it down. Disparity of income, disparity लिखिए या inequality लिखिए, एक ही बात है. Disparity of income increases as a result of inflation. Disparity of income increases as a result of inflation. This simply means that rich becomes richer and poor becomes poorer. The gap between rich and poor becomes wider as a result of inflation, है ना? ये चीज inequality of income जो है हमारे सोसाइटी में, you must be knowing that you may have gone through the a report published by Oxfam, है ना? And Oxfam report is saying that 57% of India's income and wealth belongs to only 1% of Indians, right? 57% of India's wealth have been concentrated in the hands of only 1% of India's population, right? And bottom 25% of India's population are thriving on an income of 13% of our national income. Think of the disparity. 25% of population are living on just 13% of total income, and 1% of total population are thriving on 57% of India's income and wealth. That is the extent of inequality of income and wealth in our country. And as a result of inflation, this gap between the rich and poor will become wider. The rich will become richer and poor will become poorer as a result of inflation. But why this happens? Why this happens that rich becomes richer and poor becomes poorer? No, because inflation doesn't impact everyone equally, right? Inflation doesn't impact everyone equally. In fact, at the time of inflation, some group of people in our society are benefited, right? Some group of people are benefited. And which group of people are benefited? Our business classes. Our business classes are benefited out of inflation, right? And we know that business classes are already affluent, they are rich, they are better off. So there has been a redistribution of income from poor people to rich people as a result of inflation. Every time there is inflation, you'll find that income is coming from the hands of the poor people to the rich people, right? So that will make rich richer and poor poorer. How this happens? Look at this example. Initially, when the price of X was 10 rupees per unit, we were spending 100 rupees on this, right? है ना, हम लोग 100 रुपए अपने पॉकेट से निकाल रहे थे and we were giving it to the business people, है ना, who were the supplier of this commodity. So that person was getting richer by 100 rupees and we were getting poorer by 100 rupees, right? Now we have inflation in the economy, and in order to purchase 10 units of this commodity, we are spending 200 rupees, right? Since the price has become 20 rupees per unit, है ना? So in order to purchase this 10 units of commodity, we are spending 200 rupees. So now we take out 200 rupees from our pocket and giving that 200 rupees to that person supplying the commodity. So that person is getting rich by 200 rupees now, and we are getting poorer by 200 rupees, right? So compare the situation. Initially, before inflation, the business class was getting richer by 100, we were getting poorer by 100. right? But now as a result of inflation, he is getting richer by 200 and we are getting poorer by 200. So that's going to increase the gap between the rich and the poor, है ना? So inflation redistributes income in our society from where to where? From poor people to rich people, and that increases the disparity of income in our society, है ना? So these are the internal adverse effect of inflation. ठीक है, आया समझ में? Now we'll see some external effects of inflation. Please write it down. External effects of inflation. So we are externally impacted by the this specter of inflation, है ना? Externally impacted. That means what? Now economies are integrated with each other. We are not, isolated economy. We have the integration with other countries, right? And we reflect this kind of integration by way of, the economic transactions we conduct with them. Like we import goods and services from them, we export goods and services to them. And there is inflow and outflow of FDI and FPI. Then there is movement of people from one country to another country, right? All these economic transactions reflect that we are an integrated economy. We are not working in isolation, right? So if we have inflation in our economy, that's going to impact us even externally, है ना? So what are the external effects and how we'll get impacted by it? We'll discuss them, right? So the first adverse impact of inflation is that it's going to reduce our exports. Inflation reduces our exports. Inflation reduces our exports. And in what manner that reduces our export? कैसे हमारा एक्सपोर्ट कम होगा? Okay, fine. So when we have inflation, he is trying to say that when we have inflation, but instead of making purchase from our economy, will look for another market, now, from where they can purchase at lower rate, है ना? And that is how we will lose out our export to buyers, है ना? In fact, what happens? The inflation, erodes the competitiveness of our goods and services in international market. Inflation reduces competitiveness of Indian goods and services in international market. Or that makes our product relatively expensive in international market. And that is why we lose out our exports to our buyers. Like let's suppose this marker is produced by both China and India. Let's suppose China and India. And the buyer of this marker is USA. So price of this marker initially was, let's suppose, 15 rupees in both the economies. So US could purchase either from China or from India. But now let's suppose price in China is constant while there is inflation in our economy, and price start increasing from 15 rupees to 16, then 17, then 20 rupees, that way. Now would US would purchase from India or China? Of course from China. Because inflation in our country has made our goods and services relatively expensive. So buyers, instead of making purchase from Indian economy, would like it to purchase from somewhere else where rate of inflation is lower. In other words, you can say that the competitiveness of our goods and services are eroded as a result of inflation. The ability of our goods and services to make inroads into the foreign market is completely reduced as a result of inflation. And that is why our export to our buyers will decline. When US will start purchasing more from China, obviously our market to US will decline, our export to US will decline. And this is what happens in every economy where we find inflation, right? है ना, जहां जहां पे इन्फ्लेशन होगा हमारा एक्सपोर्ट जो है कम हो जाएगा. ठीक है. What else? Inflation reduces new FDI. It reduces the flow of FDI or the flow of new FDI. Inflation reduces flow of new FDI. And that's for the same reason that we have just discussed right now. है ना? When we have inflation, that means making investment in our economy is going to be expensive, costlier. So instead of coming to India to open a plant or factory here, the MNC will go to some other economy where rate of inflation could be lower. है ना? So let's suppose US company intends to make investment either in China or in India. Before making investment, the company will look at the rate of inflation prevailing in both the economies. And if the company finds that rate of inflation in India is higher as compared to China, instead of coming to make investment in India, the company will go to China and make their investment there. Why this is so? Because everything would be expensive here. The price of land, building, prices of raw material, everything would be expensive here. And if we have higher inflation, even the labor force in our country will demand for higher wages. है ना? वो कंपनी का मालिक से बोलेगा no, such amount of money is not desired. You pay more because we have higher inflation. Right? So the cost of productions and investment will shoot up significantly as a result of inflation. Nobody wants to go to such economy and make investment. As a result of this, we find that there has been reductions in flow of new investment in our country, right? And we know how important FDI is, right? FDI creates jobs for our youth. This is very, very important. That brings in new technology to our economy that creates jobs for our people. And if there is inflation, we find that flow of FDI will come down, and that's going to cripple the avenues of jobs in our country and flow of technology that India require. ठीक है? What else? और क्या होगा? अगर हमारे कंट्री में इन्फ्लेशन है तो टूरिस्ट हमारे कंट्री में ज्यादा आएंगे या कम आएंगे? इंटरनेशनल लेवल से जो टूरिस्ट है उनका फुटफॉल जो होगा वो कम हो जाएगा, है ना? तो इंटरनेशनल flow of tourist will decline. International flow of tourists will decline as a result of inflation. Because India has become expensive than before. So tourists do have the limited budget with them. They want to avoid such destination which becomes costlier as a result of inflation. Like today nobody wants to go to Sri Lanka or Pakistan, है ना? Inflation is very high in those two countries. Even Bangladesh, है ना? Bangladesh is on the verge of collapse today, right? So Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and Pakistan, ये चारों इंडिया के जो नेबर्स हैं, they are in economic crisis right now. Even in Bangladesh, yeah, the economic crisis has started there. हम लोग बोल रहे थे ना कि बांग्लादेश का पर कैपिटा इनकम हमसे ज़्यादा हो गया, है ना? And it was not the first time that we have been left behind Bangladesh in terms of per capita income. It happened even in 1991. But India's economy is, flexible in the sense that we have the jobs in various sectors of the economy. We are a balanced economy. But not the Bangladesh economy is balanced, right? So बांग्लादेश में भी क्राइसिस यहाँ पे स्टार्ट हो गया है ना? तो ऐसी इकॉनमी को कोई विजिट करना नहीं चाहेगा क्योंकि एक्सपेंसिव है काफ़ी ज़्यादा, है ना? तो वहाँ पे रुकना, वहाँ पे ठहरना, वहाँ पे खाना, ये सारा एक्सपेंसिव होगा. तो जो टूरिस्ट का फ्लो जो है वो कम हो जाता है ऐसी इकॉनमी में. और ये तीन ऐसी चीज़ हैं, है ना, जहाँ से हमें फॉरेक्स मिलते हैं, फॉरेन एक्सचेंज मिलते हैं, है ना? हमें एक्सपोर्ट से फॉरेन एक्सचेंज मिलता है, एफडीआई से मिलता है और हमें कुछ टूरिस्ट लोगों से भी फॉरेक्स मिलता है. सो अल्टीमेटली विल फाइंड दैट देयर इज ए डेंट ऑन आवर फॉरेक्स रिजर्व, है ना? So inflation finally dent on our forex reserve, reduces the quantum of forex, reduces the quantum of forex reserve. forex reserve जो है कम होने लगते हैं as a result of inflation. ठीक है. So these are external effects of inflation, and you can see that not a single effect is there that could be beneficial for the economy, whether this is internal or external. All of them are harmful to the economy and to its people, and that is why every government, every central bank of the economy wants to stamp out the menace of inflation as soon as possible, right? We want to crush the pangs of inflation as soon as it begins to erupt in the economy. Otherwise this is going to engulf the entire economy, like we witnessed today in the economy of Pakistan and Sri Lanka, right? If we let the inflation to grow in the economy and do not control it, so mild inflation today will snowball into a hyperinflation, right? Mild inflation will snowball into a hyperinflation, and that's going to engulf the entire economy, and that is why we have to crush it as soon as it start erupting in the economy, right? So these are the adverse internal and external effects of inflation. Now we'll discuss classification of inflation. Last one is classification of inflation. First, we classify inflation on the basis of causes of inflation. First, we classify inflation on the basis of its causes. And on the basis of causes of inflation, we have two kinds of inflation. One is called demand pull inflation, and second one is called cost push inflation. Demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. So classification has been on the basis of causes of inflation. When we study about demand pull inflation and cost push inflation, that gives us an idea as to what factors lead to inflation in the economy. What are the factors that becomes responsible for inflation? That is what we come to understand when we go through these two particular kind of topic, right? है ना? Demand pull inflation and cost push inflation. So first we'll discuss demand pull inflation. Please write it down. Demand pull inflation, DPI. Demand pull inflation, please write it down. Demand pull inflation arises as a result of increase in aggregate demand for goods and services. As a result of increase in aggregate demand for goods and services. When demand for goods and services, please continue. When demand for goods and services increases and becomes more than their supplies. When demand for goods and services increases and becomes more than their supplies, then price start increasing, then price start increasing, and this increase in price is called demand pull inflation. Then price start increasing, and this increase in price is called demand pull inflation. Price start increasing, and this increase in price is called, demand pull inflation. Demand pull inflation. So this is very obvious to arise in the economy. Every time there is an increase in demand for goods and services, you'll find that it will put, inflationary pressures on the goods and services, right? But in fact, price start increasing only when demand crosses supply in the economy. Aggregate demand crosses aggregate supply in the economy, right? Price will start increasing, and this is increase in price is called demand pull inflation, or sometimes this is called demand led inflation. Since this inflation is led by demand, this is called demand led inflation. So you can see that this is an outcome of mismatch between demand and supply. है ना? Prices are the resultant of two forces of our economy, demand and supply forces, right? Prices are the outcome of combined effect of demand and supply. It's not only dependent on demand or supply, rather prices of commodity depends upon both the forces, right? But whether price will increase or decrease, it depends upon which forces are relatively stronger. If demand is stronger than supply, then price start increasing. But if supply becomes, stronger than demand, then that will cause price to decrease in the economy, है ना? तो आप ये मत समझिए कि जो इन्फ्लेशन हो रहा है इट्स ओनली बाय द फोर्सेस ऑफ डिमांड, एंड सिंस डिमांड इज इंक्रीजिंग दैट causes inflation or price to increase. No, it's in fact due to the both factors, है ना? Due to both factors that we have inflation in the economy. Here demand is increasing, no doubt, but what is happening is that supply is getting, weaker as compared to demand, or the forces of demand is outweighing the forces of supply, and that cause price to increase. So we have the demand led inflation in the economy. As but यूपीएससी आपसे ये क्वेश्चंस पूछेगी कि व्हाट इज द फंडामेंटल कॉज ऑफ डिमांड पुल इन्फ्लेशन. लेट्स सपोज आपसे पूछा गया कि व्हाट इज द फंडामेंटल कॉज ऑफ डिमांड पुल इन्फ्लेशन. ओके, सो यू विल से दैट सर इंक्रीज इन डिमांड. इंक्रीज इन डिमांड इज द प्रॉक्सिमेट कॉज, नॉट द अल्टीमेट कॉज. आपसे पूछा जा रहा फंडामेंटल कॉज ऑफ डिमांड पुल इन्फ्लेशन. दैट मीन्स यू आर बीइंग आस्क्ड व्हाट इज द अल्टीमेट कॉज. Increase in demand is the immediate cause of demand pull inflation. It is the proximate cause. It is not the ultimate cause. In ultimate cause, you will have to say the factor that is responsible for increase in demand. After all, demand pull inflation occurs in the economy due to increase in demand. है ना? But why demand increases? That is what you have to reflect upon. है ना? So why demand increases? Why demand increases? Because of better lifestyle. But why we have that kind of lifestyle? Why we improve our lifestyle? अरे मैं आपको बता चुका हूँ, इतना बार डिस्कशन हुआ है. एग्रीगेट डिमांड इंक्रीजेस ड्यू टू इंक्रीज इन मनी सप्लाई, है ना? मनी सप्लाई बढ़ेगा तो डिमांड बढ़ेगा, है या नहीं? अगर लोगों के हाथ में पहले से ज़्यादा पैसे आ जाएंगे, हम लोग क्या करेंगे? हम लोग गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज की डिमांड करेंगे, है ना? आप ये मत देखो कि पैसे कहाँ से आ रहा. जस्ट लुक एट व्हाट इज हैपनिंग विद द बिहेवियर ऑफ पीपल when they are having more money than before. They will start purchasing goods and services, right? So increase in money supply is the ultimate cause of demand pull inflation, or it is the fundamental and the most basic reason behind demand pull inflation. And that's why we have seen Reserve Bank of India, in order to control inflation, first control the supply of money through its expansive monetary policy, है ना? This is what we have seen the Reserve Bank of India doing, right? RBI, in order to control inflation, first control the volume of credit and the supply of money, because Reserve Bank of India knows that inflation is the outcome of excess money supply. So first money supply needs to be controlled in order to control inflation, है ना? तो अगर आपको proximate cause पूछेगा तो you say that increase in demand is the reason behind demand for inflation, and if you ask what is the fundamental or ultimate cause, then you have to say that it is increase in money supply. ठीक है, आगे समझ में आप लोग को? Now, how to control this demand pull inflation? You can see that this demand pull inflation is the outcome of mismatch between demand and supply forces. It arises when demand crosses supply in the economy. So there are two different ways we can control inflation, है ना? There are two different ways. Either we reduce aggregate demand, or we augment the supply in the economy. We increase the supply in the economy. There are two different ways, right? या तो हम लोग डिमांड को कम करें, जो डिमांड बढ़ गया है उसकी वजह से इन्फ्लेशन हो रहा, तो डिमांड को कम कर दे, या डिमांड बढ़ा है तो हम लोग क्या करें, साइमल्टेनियसली सप्लाई को भी हम लोग इंक्रीज करें, सो दैट प्राइस बिकम्स नॉर्मल इन द इकोनॉमी, है ना? ठीक है, दो तरीका है. आप लोग मुझे बताइए कि what Reserve Bank of India does to control inflation, whether it tries to reduce aggregate demand or Reserve Bank of India emphasize upon augmenting aggregate supply. No, what we have discussed till now in the class, we have seen the behavior of Reserve Bank of India, how exactly Reserve Bank of India stamp out the problem of inflation. That's what I am asking. कि आपने क्या देखा? आरबीआई जो है डिमांड को रिड्यूस करने की कोशिश करती है, आरबीआई डिमांड सप्लाई को बढ़ाने की कोशिश करती है. यस, ऑनलाइन वाले बच्चे बताएं. यस, मंजोत इज सेइंग सर डिक्रीज डिमांड. आपने देखा इन्फ्लेशन को कंट्रोल करने के लिए रेपो रेट बढ़ाया जाता है. रेपो रेट इंक्रीज होगा तो क्या हो रहा, मार्केट रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट विल इंक्रीज होगा, देन लोग कम क्रेडिट लेंगे, मनी की सप्लाई कम हो जाएगी, और मनी की सप्लाई कम होने से देखिए एग्रीगेट डिमांड क्या होगा, कम होगा, है ना? विच साइड रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया वर्किंग अपॉन? ऑन डिमांड साइड, नॉट ऑन सप्लाई साइड, टू कंट्रोल इन्फ्लेशन इन द इकोनॉमी. कैन यू सी दैट? क्लियर है ना? It's demand side that Reserve Bank of India manages to control inflation. But the lasting solution of demand pull inflation lies in augmenting the supply in the economy. The lasting and the better solution, I would say, है ना? The lasting and the better solution of demand pull inflation is increasing aggregate supply. Because when you increase aggregate supply, first that will create jobs in the economy, unemployment will come down, right? Secondly, that will bring down prices in the economy also as supply increases, right? So we'll have the benefits of creation of jobs in the economy when we try to augment the supply in the economy, right? And there is a limit to which we can reduce the aggregate demand. The Reserve Bank of India tries to reduce aggregate demand, but RBI is not that successful in controlling aggregate demand. Only those demand can be curtailed. You can see, only those demand can be curtailed which is based on credit from commercial banks, है ना? But not everyone buy the things from the market on the basis of credit they avail from the banking system, right? We spend our own money on the buying of things from the market, right? We are not always dependent on commercial banks. Are you getting my point or not? Here you can see that only those demand can be curtailed which comes from the which is on the basis of the credit availed from the commercial banks, right? But we people may have our own money and we may have the propensity to spend them in the economy. So even though rate of interest increases, we are not going to compromise with our demand. We keep on buying the things in the market, right? So that is why there is a limit to which Reserve Bank of India can bring down aggregate demand in the economy. So the better solution is to increase the aggregate supply. But my question is, even the Reserve Bank of India is aware of these things. This is a very simple thing, that if being the student of economics I am aware, then obviously RBI is the group of economics. RBI must be knowing that, to stamp out the problem of demand pull inflation, we have to augment the supply. So my question is, why Reserve Bank of India then emphasize upon demand side management and do not increase the supply? Yes, bit louder, please. Okay, you no, but that is not my question. My question is ki why there is the management of demand to control inflation? Why Reserve Bank of India doesn't try to increase the supply? That's my question. Sometimes, Reserve Bank of India, if it thinks that the inflation in the economy is temporary, then it's not going to manage even demand, है ना? Let the price increase, and after some time the price becomes normal in the economy, because inflation could be transient by nature, right? And when Reserve Bank of India needs the requirement of controlling inflation, it will manage aggregate demand, will try to implement expansion contractionary monetary policy, bring down money supply and control aggregate demand. But it never tries to increase aggregate supply. Why this is so? Though augmenting supply would have been the better solution. क्यों? Yes, if supply increase, price decrease, yes, that will happen. But why Reserve Bank of India is not doing that? आरबीआई क्यों नहीं कर रही, समझिए. क्योंकि इंक्रीजिंग सप्लाई विल टेक a longer period of time, है ना? It cannot be increased overnight. Supply cannot be increased overnight, है ना? It will take longer period of time. Until then, what may happen in the economy is mild inflation will snowball into hyperinflation, है ना? If we will wait supply to increase, है ना, तो क्या होगा? आज मान लो कि 4% का इन्फ्लेशन है, it will increase to 25% or 26%. Are you getting my point? है ना? तो हम लोग सप्लाई बढ़ने का इंतजार नहीं कर सकते हैं. मैंने आपको बताया था कि वी हैव टू क्रश इन्फ्लेशन एज सुन एज इट स्टार्ट एरप्टिंग इन द इकोनॉमी, है ना? अदरवाइज क्या होगा? माइल्ड इन्फ्लेशन ऑफ सिंगल डिजिट विल कन्वर्ट इनटू हाइपर इन्फ्लेशन, and that will start destroying economy and its people in a rapid manner, है ना? Reserve Bank of India's mandate is to be vigilant on inflation. This is what Reserve Bank of India has been asked to do, है ना? Be vigilant on inflation, है ना? And you have to crush it as soon as it start increasing in the economy. And that is why Reserve Bank of India, instead of increasing supply that will take longer period of time, manages demand that can be done overnight, right? You just need to increase the rate of interest in the economy, and then people will start availing lower amount of credit, and that will help Reserve Bank of India controlling of demand and prices, right? आ गया समझ में? So this is about the demand pull inflation, and the second one is cost push inflation. लिखिए, cost push inflation. Cost push inflation लिखिए आप लोग. Cost push inflation arises due to increase in cost of production, due to increase in cost of production. Simple reason, है ना? It arises due to increase in cost. ठीक है? So what happens when cost increases? That compels our producers to sell their output in the market at higher prices, है ना? आ रहा कि नहीं समझ में? When cost will increase, that compels our producers to sell their output in the market at higher prices. Price will also increase, and this increase in price is called cost push inflation. है ना? समझ में आया आप लोग को बच्चों? अगर प्रोड्यूसर्स के कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन जो है बढ़ रहा है ना, तो अपने गुड्स को जो है ज़्यादा दाम में बेचेगा या नहीं? यानी प्राइस बढ़ेगा इकॉनमी में, इन्फ्लेशन होगा, और इस इन्फ्लेशन को हम क्या कह रहे हैं? कॉस्ट पुश इन्फ्लेशन. तो डिमांड पुल इन्फ्लेशन अराइजेज ड्यू टू इंक्रीज इन एग्रीगेट डिमांड, बट कॉस्ट पुश इन्फ्लेशन अराइजेज ड्यू टू इंक्रीज इन कॉस्ट. है ना? ठीक है. तो कॉस्ट में क्या क्या आता है? व्हाट आर द डिफरेंट कंपोनेंट्स ऑफ कॉस्ट? अगर आप एक प्रोड्यूसर है, मान लो कि आप मार्कर को प्रोड्यूस कर अपने फैक्ट्री में, तो एज ए ऑनर ऑफ दिस फैक्ट्री, बीइंग द प्रोड्यूसर्स, व्हाट कॉस्ट यू विल बेयर? यस, प्राइसेस ऑफ, एक एक करके बोलिए, है ना. सो द फर्स्ट कंपोनेंट ऑफ कॉस्ट इज प्राइसेस ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल. प्राइसेस ऑफ रॉ मटेरियल. To produce something, you need to purchase raw material. You'll have to spend money on them. This is your cost. What else? Yes, prices of labor. You will hire the labor and you will pay wages. है ना? So wages are component of cost. What else? Okay. What else? The rent that you may pay to the landlord. है ना? You may not have your own buildings or land, है ना? So you start taking them from the landlord and you'll have to pay the rent, है ना? Then prices of other inputs like electricity, water, expenses of your office, है ना? And even the interest that you pay to the banks on availing capital, right? For running the businesses, you are not using your own capital, you avail them from the banking system. And for availing the capital from banks, you'll have to pay the interest, right, on timely basis. So these are the components of cost. And the major component of cost is wages. In India, 67% of cost comprises of wages in our country. So if any one of them increases, that will cause, cost of productions to increase, and that compel our producers to sell their output in higher prices. Right? Price will increase, and this increase in price is called cost push inflation. Right? आगे समझ में आप लोगों को? जैसे इसको हम लोग कहते हैं, मान लो कि वेजेस इंक्रीज होता है, कॉस्ट बढ़ेगा, और फिर इससे इन्फ्लेशन हुआ. इसको हम लोग कहते हैं वेज इंड्यूस्ड इन्फ्लेशन. दिस इज कॉल्ड वेज इंड्यूस्ड इन्फ्लेशन. So wage induced inflation is one of the cost push inflation. है ना? Wage induced inflation is one of the cost push inflation. Here the exact reason has been specified why inflation has occurred in the economy. It has occurred due to increase in wages. है ना? Labor force are demanding more wages, and that's going to increase cost. So producers will sell their output at higher prices, will have the inflation. This inflation is called wage induced. Sometimes we have the profit induced inflation in the economy. Profit induced inflation. And this occurs when, the margin of profit that our producers wants increases. है ना? Let's suppose in this product, I was anticipating 20% of profit. But now I want to increase my margin of profit to 30%. है ना? So since profit will increase, right? Since profit will increase, I will have to sell the output at higher prices. Then only I will have the advantage of more profit, right? है ना? So to have more profit, I will sell output at higher prices. The inflation in the economy will increase, and this is called profit induced inflation, right? So all this, inflation comes within the ambit of cost push inflation. Any of the component increases, that increases the cost, that increases prices, and that is called the cost push inflation. ठीक है? So in the economy, we have the inflation as a result of these two factors. either due to increase in aggregate demand or due to increase in cost, है ना? But you cannot segregate the factor that have been responsible for inflation in the economy. Like for example, if rate of inflation in the economy is, let's suppose, 7%, so how much is due to demand pull inflation and how much is due to cost push inflation? That is something we cannot break down, है ना? Inflation cannot be break down between these two factors. Yes, I mean, some part of inflation is due to increase in aggregate demand and some is due to increase in cost, but you cannot, quantify to what extent this is due to demand pull inflation and what extent this is due to cost push inflation, right? Yes, we have the impact of both the factors simultaneously and that have resulted into inflation in the economy. लेकिन हम लोग उसको ब्रेक डाउन नहीं कर पाएंगे कि कितना प्रतिशत कॉस्ट में बढ़ने की वजह से है, कितना प्रतिशत यहाँ पे डिमांड में इंक्रीज की वजह से है. दोनों का इफेक्ट होता है इकोनॉमी में, है ना? अभी किसका इफेक्ट है? Whose effect is more pronounced today in inflation? किसका इफेक्ट ज्यादा है इन्फ्लेशन में? डू यू फाइंड दैट इट्स मोर ड्यू टू एग्रीगेट डिमांड और ड्यू टू इंक्रीज इन कॉस्ट? यस, क्योंकि अभी डिमांड इज सबड्यूड, है ना? लोगों ने अपने स्पेंडिंग को थोड़ा सा कर्टेल करके रखा है ना? वी आर नॉट श्योर अबाउट व्हाट विल हैपन in coming months or coming year, है ना? We are still grappling with the problem of outbreak of various variants of COVID, right? So in that gloomy situation, we have suspended our discretionary purchases. We are not spending that much, so demand is not that strong in the economy. Aggregate demand is moderate in the economy. In spite of that, we find that there is inflation. Why? Because cost is on the rise, है ना? Cost of everything is on the increase, like the cost of metal, है ना? Cost of crude oil or petrol, cost of diesel, everything is on the rise and that have resulted into higher inflation in our economy. ठीक है क्या? हाँ, उसकी वजह से है ना? उसकी वजह से तो मेटल और पेट्रोल और डीजल के दाम बढ़े हैं ना? मेटल्स के जो दाम बढ़े हैं आपका, चाहे वो आपका एल्युमिनियम का हो या निकल का हो या फिर आपका आयरन ओर का हो या सोयाबीन का दाम बढ़ा है ना? या वीट के दाम बढ़े हैं. कमोडिटी के प्राइस जो अभी बढ़े हैं ना, दैट्स मोर ड्यू टू वॉर बिटवीन रसिया एंड यूक्रेन, है ना? तो उसकी वजह से ज़्यादा इन्फ्लेशन है. Now controlling of this cost push inflation, how we can control cost push inflation? We have seen that in case of demand pull inflation, it's relatively easier. Either you reduce aggregate demand or you increase supply. But what happens when we have the cost push inflation? How can we control this cost push inflation? It's not that easy to control cost push inflation. Why? Because in order to control cost push inflation, first we'll have to reduce the cost. आपको cost को क्या करना होगा? Reduce करना होगा. And that is something beyond the control of our producers. Our producers unilaterally cannot control cost, है ना? ये उनके लिए जो है exogenous factor, external factor है. It's not within the ambit of producers to reduce the cost. और एटलीस्ट जो है वे लोग यूनिलैटरली इसको रिड्यूस नहीं कर सकते हैं. जैसे वेजेस, है ना? मान लो कि वेजेस इंक्रीज हो रहा, तो क्या हमारे प्रोड्यूसर्स, हमारे कंपनीज वेजेस को यूनिलैटरली कम कर सकते हैं? नो. वेजेस डिसाइडेड इन द इकोनॉमी इज द आउटकम ऑफ निगोशिएशन बिटवीन द वर्कर्स एंड द मैनेजमेंट, है ना? The rate of wages prevailing in the economy is the outcome of negotiation between the trade union and the management. So management of the company unilaterally cannot bring it down, है ना? उसको अकेले जो है कम नहीं कर सकता है. दोनों के negotiations के बाद जो है ये आपका फिक्स होता है. ठीक है? उसी तरीके से अदर भी components है that is beyond the control of the producers. Producers cannot bring them down in order to reduce the cost, है ना? First difficulty is there. Second difficulty is that, you know, the propensity of all these components of cost is to increase on a continuous basis. You hardly find them plummeting. Rather, you find that all these components of cost keeps on increasing year by year. है ना? I give you the example. Let's suppose you were working in some factory and you were demanding 10,000 rupees then. है ना? This was your monthly wages, right? So will you say your employer that I want 5,000 rupees this year, otherwise I am going to leave the job? Will you demand more than 10,000 or less than 10,000? More than 10,000. So where is the tendency of wages, to increase or decrease? To increase. It always increases, है ना? And so is with rent. Rent is also increasing, है ना? ये इंटरेस्ट कंपोनेंट जो है ये फ्लैक्चुएट होता है, कभी बढ़ता है कभी कम होता है, बट दैट्स नॉट गोइंग टू इन्फ्लुएंस दैट मच इन आवर कंट्री, एज आई टोल्ड यू दैट 67% ऑफ कॉस्ट इन आवर कंट्री कंप्राइजेज ऑफ वेजेस, एंड द टेंडेंसी ऑफ वेज इज ऑलवेज टू इंक्रीज, है ना? एंड दैट इज वाई कॉस्ट कीप्स ऑन इंक्रीजिंग एंड दैट ट्रांसलेट इनटू कॉस्ट प्लस इन्फ्लेशन, है ना? या इन ए वेरी सिचुएशंस लाइक कोविड आउटब्रेक, है ना, रेंट जो है थोड़ा सा क्या हो गया, कम हो गया है, थोड़ा सा कम हुआ है, ज़्यादा कम नहीं हुआ है, ये हो सकता है। लेकिन आपका जो है, मैं बता रहा हूँ कि ज़्यादा जो आपका कॉस्ट का जो भाग होता है वो आपका वेजेस का होता है, और वेजेस जो है हमेशा ये बढ़ता जा रहा है ना, और यही रीज़न है कि हम कॉस्ट को इस तरीके से कंट्रोल नहीं कर सकते हैं। सो व्हाट इज द वे आउट, हाउ वी कैन कंट्रोल दिस कॉस्ट पुश इन्फ्लेशन? हम लोग वी कैन कंट्रोल दिस कॉस्ट पुश इन्फ्लेशन थ्रू इनोवेशंस, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, फर्स्ट थ्रू इनोवेशंस, एंड सेकेंड बाय यूजिंग द न्यू एंड लेटेस्ट टेक्नोलॉजी, है ना? विल हैव टू इंस्टॉल न्यू एंड लेटेस्ट टेक्नोलॉजी in all the areas of productions. When we start installing new and latest technology, that's going to increase our productions per unit of time. And when productions per unit of time increases, our average cost will come down. है ना? Average cost जो होता है, average cost is equal to total cost upon output होता है. Look here. Total cost जो है that remains fixed in the short period of time. This remains fixed in the short period of time. है ना? And what happens if Q increases? When Q or output increases, that will bring average cost, and this can be increased by installing new and sophisticated technology, right? So we'll introduce innovations in the area of productions and distributions, right? Innovations, what does that mean? Innovations means new technology. Okay, what you mean by innovations? Innovations का मतलब क्या है? नहीं, हमेशा इनोवेशंस का मतलब न्यू टेक्नोलॉजी नहीं होता है ना. इनोवेशंस का मतलब होता है टू इंट्रोड्यूस समथिंग न्यू इन द एरिया ऑफ प्रोडक्शंस एंड डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन, है ना? टू डू समथिंग इन अ डिफरेंट मैनर that helps you reduce the cost, like the introduction of assembly line. When this was introduced, that drastically reduced the cost of productions in the manufacturing units. Assembly line जानते हैं आप लोग? You have seen the assembly line? अच्छा, ठीक है, आपने वो देखा है ना, बेल्ट के थ्रू जो है प्रोडक्शंस होता है, ऑटोमेटिक हो गया आजकल, है ना? मेडिसिन बन रहा तो पैकेजिंग होता है, बेल्ट आगे बढ़ता रहता है ना. सो दैट इज असेंबली लाइन. Initially what used to happen at the time of F.W. Taylor, है ना, मैं 1910 की बात बता रहा हूँ. उस समय जो है असेंबली लाइन में सारे वर्कर्स खड़े रहते थे एक एक पॉइंट पे, और सबका एक स्पेसिफिक काम हुआ करता था, है ना? Some will do the packaging, some will put the things into the package, है ना? Like all the workers are standing there, and that used to inflate the cost significantly, है ना? आपको वेजेस वहाँ पे बहुत ज़्यादा देना होगा. आपने चीज़ों को क्या किया, ऑटोमेटिक कर दिया, है ना? यू स्टार्टेड थिंकिंग इन अ डिफरेंट मैनर, है ना, कि व्हाई नॉट स्टार्ट डूइंग दिस थिंग इन अ डिफरेंट मैनर. सो इनोवेशंस ऑलवेज मीन्स इंट्रोड्यूसिंग न्यू थिंग्स or introducing new way of thing in your area of productions or distributions, and that have the potential to bring down the cost, right? So by the use of new technology and innovations in the field of productions and distributions, we can think of bringing down cost of productions, right? And that way we can reduce cost plus inflation in the economy. ठीक है, आ गया समझ में? अच्छा, इन्होंने एक अच्छा मंजोत ने लिखा यहाँ पे, सर टैक्सेस इम्पोज बाय गवर्नमेंट, taxes imposed by government, do you think that this is the component of cost? Yes, है ना? हमारे जो प्रोड्यूसर्स होते हैं उनको जो टैक्स पे करना होता है ना, दे कंसीडर टैक्स टू बी द पार्ट ऑफ देयर कॉस्ट, है ना? दे कंसीडर टैक्स टू बी द पार्ट ऑफ देयर कॉस्ट, एंड इफ टैक्स इंक्रीजेज दैट इंक्रीजेज देयर कॉस्ट, है ना? दिस कुड बी टैक्स इंड्यूस्ड इन्फ्लेशन, दिस इज ऑल्सो कॉल्ड टैक्स इंड्यूस्ड इन्फ्लेशन, दिस इज ऑल्सो व्हाट, कॉस्ट पुश इन्फ्लेशन। आगे समझ में आप लोग को? Now we'll see another classification of inflation. So you have the idea as to why inflation occurs in the economy, है ना? You no controlling, समझ गए? लिख लो, पॉइंट में लिख लो कि by the use of new technology and innovations we can reduce the cost push inflation. By the use of new technology and innovations we can reduce cost push inflation in the economy. क्या? नहीं तो why you are concerned about what will happen to people? Being the producers, you are not concerned about what is happening at the macro level. और टेक्नोलॉजी जो है अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट क्रिएट नहीं करता है, ये गलत परसेप्शन है ना? आप देखेंगे कि विद द एडवेंट ऑफ न्यू टेक्नोलॉजी जो है लोगों का एम्प्लॉयमेंट जो है और ज़्यादा बढ़ गया है, बल्कि टेक्नोलॉजी जो है क्या करता है ना, रिप्लेस करता है वर्कर्स को फ्रॉम कैपिटल इंटेंसिव इंडस्ट्रीज टू लेबर इंटेंसिव इंडस्ट्रीज, है ना? देयर इज ए रिप्लेसमेंट ऑफ वर्कर्स एंड देयर इज नो लॉस ऑफ जॉब्स एज ए रिजल्ट ऑफ इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ न्यू टेक्नोलॉजी। इनफैक्ट टेक्नोलॉजी आने से जो है और एडिशनल एम्प्लॉयमेंट जो है क्रिएट होता है ना? ठीक है। चलिए, सेकेंड क्लासिफिकेशन, दिस इज ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ rate of inflation. On the basis of rate of inflation we can have mild inflation, we can have galloping inflation, and at last we may have hyperinflation. So this classification is on the basis of rate of inflation. This is on the basis of rate of inflation. So first we'll see what we mean by rate of inflation. Rate of inflation means percentage increase in average price, है ना? Rate of inflation means percentage increase in average price. This can be 1%, 2%, 3, 5, है ना, 15, 20%, है ना? So annual increase in average price is called rate of inflation, and on the basis of increase in price or annual increase in price we can have these three kinds of inflation: mild inflation, galloping inflation, and hyperinflation. First we'll see the mild inflation. So what is mild inflation? Single digit inflation rate is called single digit inflation rate is called mild inflation. लिख लीजिए, single digit inflation rate is called mild inflation. So up to what percentage inflation is considered to be mild? 9%, है ना? Up to 9% inflation should be considered as mild, as per the um, conceptual meaning of mild inflation. But practically today, worldwide, our economists have the unanimity among themselves that only up to 6% of inflation rate must be considered as mild inflation, not beyond that, है ना? So practically up to 6% of inflation is considered as mild inflation, but theoretically up to 9% of inflation is called mild inflation. Why this is called mild? Because rate of inflation is very small here. You can see that prices in the economy increases in a single digit, है ना? It could be 1%, 2%, up to only 6%. So the pace of increase is not that fast. So we call it mild inflation. Mild inflation is also called creeping inflation. It is also called creeping inflation, है ना? It is also called creeping inflation. Why creeping? धीरे धीरे चल रहा ना, जैसे रेप्टाइल्स जो है क्रीपिंग करता है, धीरे धीरे चलता है. सो दिस इज कॉल्ड क्रीपिंग इन्फ्लेशन. ठीक है. इंडिया हैज माइल्ड इन्फ्लेशन. एज यू कैन सी दैट आवर इन्फ्लेशन इज नियर अबाउट 7%. गैलोपिंग इन्फ्लेशन क्या है? डबल एंड ट्रिपल डिजिट इन्फ्लेशन रेट इज कॉल्ड गैलोपिंग इन्फ्लेशन. लिखिए, double and triple digit inflation rate is called galloping inflation, है ना? और this is also called jumping inflation, because gallop means to jump, है ना? Gallop means to jump. The inflation is bit faster. The inflation is jumping now. You can see that prices in the economy is increasing in double digit. Let's suppose inflation of 15% or 20% or 87%, or even the triple digit inflation rate like 145%. This is galloping inflation, है ना? So as compared to mild inflation, this is faster. This is more harmful for the economy and its people. Here you find that there has been a rapid decline in the purchasing power of money in galloping inflation as compared to mild inflation, right? And the most severe kind of inflation that could have in the economy is called hyperinflation, है ना? This is hyperinflation, in which we find that prices in the economy keeps on increasing every second, every minute, and every hour. You simply cannot stop price to remain constant, है ना? It's increasing all the time. You cannot simply control this. It's increasing every second, every minute, and every hour. Like you went to the shop and asked the price. What is the price I want to buy this, है ना? And you informed that this is of 50 rupees. You went to the home, bring in order to bring the money, right? And by the time you come back to the shopkeeper, the price of this commodity has increased from 50 rupees to 500 rupees, right? Because price keeps on increasing in that situation, and it's very difficult to imagine the situation of hyperinflation for us, because we have not confronted the situation of hyperinflation since the time of independence. We have been lucky in this term, है ना? We have been lucky in this term that we have not confronted with the situation of hyperinflation. But this is a real situation in which you find that prices in the economy increases by lakhs of percentage or even crores of percentage, है ना? So inflation in lakhs of percentage means what? The price of commodity that was 1 rupee last year will have 1 lakh rupees this year. right? If rate of inflation is 1 lakh%, what does that mean? That means the price of commodity that was 1 rupee last year will be of 1 lakh rupees this year. So when we have the hyperinflation, the percentage of inflation could be, significant. It could be of any numbers running into lakhs and crores. It never happened in our country. We have been lucky, but it happened elsewhere. Like we have several examples of hyperinflation. We have the examples of hyperinflation in Germany after First World War, है ना? जर्मनी में हाइपर इन्फ्लेशन आया था. Germany got defeated in First War, and then the victor nations held Germany responsible for this war, asked Germany to pay reparation for this loss, है ना? And in order to pay the reparation to the victor nations, Germany had to print new money. And printing of new money, increased supply of money in the economy, right? And that resulted into hyperinflation in 1922. There was hyperinflation in 1923 in fact. और ये लाखों परसेंटेज में था, करोड़ों में था ये, है ना? जैसे अभी हम लोग बात करें ना 87%, 20%, 15%, है ना? वो करोड़ों परसेंट में इन्फ्लेशन था. इतना कि हम लोग सोच भी नहीं सकते हैं, इतना इन्फ्लेशन था. वहाँ की एक महिला ने क्या कहा था, ध्यान से सुनना. उन्होंने कहा था कि जस्ट 1 year बैक आई यूज्ड टू गो टू मार्केट विथ मनी इन माई पॉकेट and come back from market with vegetables in my basket. This year I am going to market with money in my basket and coming back from market with vegetables in my pocket. है ना? पिछले साल मैं अपने पॉकेट में पैसे लेकर जाती थी और थैले भर सब्जी लेकर आती थी. And this year I am going to market with money in my basket and coming back from market with vegetables in my pocket. इस साल मैं क्या कर रही हूँ, थैले भर पैसे लेकर जाती हूँ, मैं इतना पैसे लेकर जाती हूँ. सच ए ह्यूज अमाउंट ऑफ मनी आई एम गोइंग टू मार्केट विथ एंड कमिंग फ्रॉम मार्केट विथ वेरी स्मॉल क्वांटिटी ऑफ वेजिटेबल्स. So look at what happens to the purchasing power of such a colossal amount of money. Nothing that gives you nothing at all, but only a few vegetables. समझ रहे हैं? तो परचेजिंग पावर जो है पूरा जो है क्या हो जाता है, खत्म हो जाता है. And when this happens in the economy, तो बच्चों के लिए मिल्क को भी पाना जो है हमारे लिए कठिन हो जाता है ना? हम मेडिसिन नहीं खरीद पाएंगे, अपने घर में जो बच्चे हैं उनको हम मिल्क भी नहीं दे पाते हैं. कई लोगों की जान चली जाती है इस हाइपर इन्फ्लेशन में, सिंपली बिकॉज वी कैनॉट अफोर्ड थिंग्स ऑन डे टू डे लाइफ, है ना? ये होता है हाइपर इन्फ्लेशन में. देयर इज प्रोटेस्ट एवरीवेयर, है ना? पीपल स्टार्ट होल्डिंग द प्रोटेस्ट अगेंस्ट द गवर्नमेंट पॉलिसीज एंड दे स्टार्ट बर्निंग द करेंसी. दे लूज देयर कॉन्फिडेंस ऑन द करेंसी बिकॉज करेंसी हैज बिन प्लमेटिंग इन इट्स वैल्यू, कैनॉट गिव यू इवन द एसेंशियल्स, है ना? ठीक है. रघुराम राजन ने कहा था कि एट द टाइम ऑफ हाइपर इन्फ्लेशन मनी बिकम्स जस्ट लाइक हॉट पोटैटो दैट नोबडी वांट्स टू होल्ड, है ना? ये गर्म आलू की तरह हो जाता है पैसे, दैट नोबडी वांट्स टू होल्ड. द लॉन्गर यू होल्ड द मोर रैपिडली इट्स वैल्यू रिड्यूसेस. पैसे गर्म आलू की तरह हो जाता, कोई पकड़ना नहीं चाहता, एवरीबडी वांट्स टू थ्रो इट अवे, है ना? हाइपर इन्फ्लेशन में आप जितने देर पैसे हाथ में रखोगे, योर पैसा इज लूजिंग इट्स वैल्यू, isn't it? है ना? So better to convert it into goods and services that you require, isn't it? The longer you hold it, the more rapidly its value will be eroded, है ना? So you may have money with banks also. You may have deposited some amount with banks. Would you like to leave your money with banks or withdraw those money as soon as possible? Will you hold the money with banks or will you withdraw it to spend it as soon as possible at the time of hyperinflation? अगर हाइपर इन्फ्लेशन है तो आप अपने पैसे को बैंक में ही रखने दोगे, छोड़ दोगे, या विल यू विड्रॉ दैम एंड स्पेंड एज सुन एज पॉसिबल? यस, यू विल नॉट लिव दैम विद बैंक्स बिकॉज जितनी देर आप छोड़ोगे उसका परचेजिंग पावर क्या होता जा रहा, कम होता जा रहा है ना, तो आप क्या करना चाहोगे, आप विड्रॉ करके उसको जल्द से जल्द स्पेंड करना चाहोगे. एवरीबडी वांट्स दैट, है ना. दे all rush to the bank to withdraw the money, and this situation is called bank run. We have the situation of bank run at the time of hyperinflation, है ना. So bank run is the situation. कोई भी फिल्म देखे हो जिसमें बैंक रन को दिखाया गया, आज आप लोग गूगल पे सर्च करना, कोई हॉलीवुड मूवी है ना, बहुत सारे ऐसे फिल्म है जिसमें बैंक रन को दिखाया गया. दिस इज द रन ऑन द बैंक, एंड हियर रन ऑन द बैंक मीन्स, I mean, large number of people rush to the bank en masse, है ना, together to withdraw the money, and that leads to failure of banks. Banks cannot fulfill the commitment if everybody of us go to the bank to withdraw the money, है ना. बैंक के पास इतने पैसे नहीं होते हैं. हमारे पैसे को उन्होंने क्या किया है, उन्होंने किसी और को उधार में दे दिया है. हम लोग जब सब अपने पैसे की डिमांड करेंगे एक साथ, तो that leads to failure of the bank. So there is, you know, chaos and confusion in financial market even at the time of hyperinflation, है ना. हाइपरइन्फ्लेशन के टाइम में फाइनेंशियल मार्केट भी जो है पूरा कोलैप्स हो जाता है. बैंक्स जो है एक एक करके बंद होने लगते हैं. पॉलिटिकल लाइफ तो डिसरप्ट होता ही है, हर एक जगह प्रोटेस्ट, सिविल लाइफ जो है पूरा खत्म हो जाता है. डेथ्स हमें देखने को मिलते हैं क्योंकि हम एसेंशियल को भी अफोर्ड नहीं कर पाते हैं. दिस आर द एडवर्स इम्पैक्ट ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन, एंड इट हैपेंड एवरीवेयर, नॉट इन जर्मनी ऑल्सो, नॉट ओनली इन जर्मनी. इवन द यूएसएसआर कन्फ्रंटेड दिस सिचुएशन इन 1992, है ना. इन 1991 देयर वाज डिसइंटीग्रेशन ऑफ यूएसएसआर. यूएसएसआर यूज्ड टू बी, you know, a block of 15 more countries that broke away from Russia, है ना, and became the part of Western Europe, like Ukraine, है ना. Ukraine was the part of USSR, ना. So in 1991, when there was disintegrations, the next year Russia had hyperinflation. Then you have hyperinflation recent past in Venezuela in 2017, Zimbabwe in 2015, Brazil, Argentina. You have a multiple of countries that confronted this kind of, you know, situation, but India has been lucky. There has been no hyperinflation as of now. ठीक है क्या? नहीं, इन्फ्लेशन होगा तो आपकी करेंसी की वैल्यू तो ऐसे कम हो जाएगी. इन्फ्लेशन होने से देयर इज डेप्रिसिएशन ऑफ करेंसी, करेंसी की वैल्यू कम हो जाएगी क्योंकि एक्सपोर्ट कम हो जाएगा. एक्सपोर्ट का मतलब, कम होने का मतलब है इंडियन रुपी की डिमांड कम हो जाएगी, है ना. इन्वेस्टमेंट कम आएगा, तो रुपी का वैल्यू जो है आपका इन्फ्लेशन के ऊपर डिपेंड करता है. क्या व्हाट यू नो, hyperinflation is an aggravated form of demand pull inflation, है ना. It's a much distorted version of demand pull inflation. When demand pull inflation becomes, you know, acute in the economy, that translate into hyperinflation. ये होता है, डिमांड जो है बहुत ज्यादा हो जाएगा सप्लाई से. जर्मनी में ऐसा क्यों हुआ? जर्मनी ने नया मनी को प्रिंट किया, है ना. मनी सप्लाई तुरंत क्या हो गया, बढ़ा, डिमांड बढ़ा, है ना. सप्लाई तो था ही नहीं. युद्ध के टाइम में क्या होता है, देयर इज सस्पेंशन ऑफ ऑल द इकोनॉमिक एक्टिविटीज. प्रोड्यूसर्स डू नॉट वांट टू टेक रिस्क इन द इकोनॉमी, राइट, एंड दे कर्टेल देयर प्रोडक्शन, है ना. सो प्रोडक्शन हैज ऑलरेडी बीन सस्पेंडेड. देयर हैज बीन नो सिग्निफिकेंट प्रोडक्शंस इन द इकोनॉमी, but people do have the purchasing power as new money has been injected into the system, leading to increase in aggregate demand. So this became the reasons behind, you know, the hyperinflation. So hyperinflation is always the aggravated form of demand pull inflation. वो हमेशा demand pull inflation का aggravated form होता है. And in most of the countries where we have the cases of hyperinflation, it has been found that it's because of, you know, mismanagement of currency in those countries, like mismanagement of money supply. When money supply becomes colossal in the economy without a commensurate increase in productions, then that translate into hyperinflation. ठीक है, तो हमें इस पे ध्यान देना होगा, हमें सप्लाई पे ध्यान देना होगा. सप्लाई जितना रॉबस्ट होगा, स्ट्रांग होगा, हम लोग को ऐसा इन्फ्लेशन का सामना नहीं करना पड़ेगा। ठीक है, चलिए। इसमें से माइल्ड इन्फ्लेशन जो है ना, इसको हम लोग इकोनॉमी के लिए बेनिफिशियल मानते हैं, माइल्ड इन्फ्लेशन को। इसलिए याद रखना कि सभी इन्फ्लेशन खराब नहीं होता है। माइल्ड इन्फ्लेशन इज इन फैक्ट कंसिडर्ड टू बी द टॉनिक फॉर इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट, है ना। इट इज कंसिडर्ड फॉर द इट इज कंसिडर्ड टू बी द टॉनिक फॉर इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट, एसेंशियल। हम्म। इसमें क्या है देखो, इसको मैं क्यों सही कहता हूँ, क्यों इकोनॉमिक्स लोग इसको सही कहते हैं माइल्ड इन्फ्लेशन को, क्योंकि इट्स ए विन विन सिचुएशन फॉर बोथ कंज्यूमर्स एंड प्रोड्यूसर्स। In mild inflation, what happens? Inflation, let's suppose inflation is 5%. Let's suppose this is mild inflation, है ना? That means price in the economies are increasing by 5% every year, and this increase in price incentivizes incentivizes whom? Or producers. They find that prices are increasing by 5%, so their profit are also increasing 5%. So that encourages them to produce, to keep on producing goods and services in required quantity, right? तो वो क्या करेंगे, लेबर फोर्स को हायर करते रहेंगे, आउटपुट को प्रोड्यूस करते रहेंगे। लेबर को यहाँ पे एम्प्लॉयमेंट मिल रहा, एम्प्लॉयमेंट मिल रहा, इसका मतलब है दे आर गेटिंग देयर इनकम्स, राइट? दे आर गेटिंग देयर इनकम्स, सो दे विल नॉट माइंड दिस इंक्रीज इन price by 5% as they are getting the income from the employment as well, है ना? So this is not going to pinch them, it's not going to trouble them, as they are getting the income by way of employment. So this is a win-win situation for both consumers as well as producers, right? Mild rate of inflation incentivize our producers, right? They will keep on producing things, है ना? And that keeps on economy revolving, है ना? From one point to another point will provide the employment becomes the source of income, and then income is being spent on the purchase of goods and services, and then it further incentivizes our producers to take the plunge, produce more and more. So the wheel of economy keeps on revolving. But this doesn't happen in case of galloping and hyperinflation. So what happens if inflation is now, let's suppose 35%? So initially this will incentivize our producers. They'll find that price has skyrocketed, है ना? Price has gone through the roof, right? And in the greed of profit, they will start producing more and more, है ना? उनको लगेगा यार प्रॉफिट मेरा 35% इंक्रीज हो जाएगा। उन्होंने क्या किया, इन द फर्स्ट इंस्टेंस व्हाट दे विल डू इज टू हायर द लेबर फोर्स एंड प्रोड्यूस abundant quantity of goods and services, right? Now we have this much of goods and services lying in the economy, but when producers will go to the market to sell them off, है ना? Like I'm the producers, I produce this much of goods and services, now I'm going to market to sell it off. I will find that there is less number of buyers. As a result of this increase in price by 35%, demand will come down. Demand responds negatively to the price. When price increases, demand comes down, है ना? Demand तुरंत क्या हो जाएगा, कम हो जाएगा. That means some amount of goods and services produced in the economy will remain unsold, है ना? इतना unsold रह गया. And once you have the inventory of unsold commodity, would you like to produce more in the economy? No, है ना? आपके पास ऑलरेडी अनसोल्ड कमोडिटी पड़ा हुआ है, आप क्या करेंगे, अपने फैक्ट्री से लेबर फोर्स को रिट्रेंच करेंगे, कट ऑफ, है ना? यू विल कट देम ऑफ फ्रॉम द फैक्ट्री, सेइंग दैट नो, वी डोंट हैव द डिमांड फॉर गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, लुक हियर वी हैव ऑलरेडी क्वांटिटी ऑफ अनसोल्ड कमोडिटी, सो यू प्लीज गो अवे, आई विल कॉल यू बैक, है ना? यहाँ पे अल्टीमेटली क्या हो रहा, लोगों को अब एम्प्लॉयमेंट मिलना बंद हो जाएगा, विल हैव द अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट, है ना? यू कैन सी दैट देयर इज a clog in the system, है ना? There is a clog in the system that in a kind क्या कर रहा ना, इकोनॉमी को आगे बढ़ने से रोक रहा। इकोनॉमी आगे कब बढ़ता, जब इसको एम्प्लॉयमेंट मिलता, इनकम इज बीइंग जनरेटेड, इनकम इज स्पेंट ऑन द कमोडिटी गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, देन फर्दर प्रोडक्शंस वुड हैव टेकन प्लेस, बट हियर व्हाट वी फाइंड दैट सम नंबर ऑफ people in the economy will be rendered unemployed, and once you have unemployment, then it's going to further dent in aggregate demand. So the entire process of productions, distributions and employment will be put into jeopardy as a result of this one. So this is not beneficial for the economy, but mild inflation keeps the wheel of economy revolving, that is considered to be the required inflation for the sake of growth of the economy. ठीक है, पानी पियोगे? अरे इतना जरूरी काम. हाँ जी, ऑनलाइन वाले बच्चे आप लोग समझ पा रहे हो डिस्कशन को? कुछ पूछना है तो पूछ सकते हो. ठीक है, समझ में आ रहा आप लोग को? आपको आ रहा? So third classification is on the basis of inclusion and exclusion of commodities. लिखिए इसको. This is the last classification I am going to make of inflation, and this classification is on the basis of inclusion and exclusion of commodities. Inclusion and exclusion of commodities. ये लास्ट क्लासिफिकेशन हम लोग पढ़ेंगे इन्फ्लेशन का, है ना, और इसे हम लोग कहते हैं ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ इंक्लूजन एंड एक्सक्लूजन ऑफ कमोडिटीज. बट व्हाट डज दैट मीन? सी, in the calculation of inflation we take into consideration the average price of some goods and services, है ना. Like in the very initial stage of discussion on this chapter I told you that the prices of 500 goods and services, let's suppose, are considered for the sake of calculation of inflation in our country, है ना. हम लोग जब इन्फ्लेशन को कंसीडर कर रहे होते हैं तो हम जानते हैं कि इन्फ्लेशन रेफर्स टू इंक्रीज इन एवरेज प्राइस, है ना. एवरेज प्राइस ऑफ व्हाट? एवरेज प्राइस ऑफ सम गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज. Average price of some goods and services, like I told you that for the sake of calculation of inflation, you know, prices of 500 goods and services are, let's suppose, considered. But now the question is what goods to be included and what goods to be excluded, है ना. On that criteria inflation can be of two types, है ना, on the basis of inclusion and exclusion of commodities whose prices are being considered, included, and whose prices are not being considered or excluded. On that basis we can have two kinds of inflation. One is called headline inflation, and second one is called core inflation. है ना. This is very very important from your examinations point of view, है ना. Headline inflation and core inflation. So we'll see the difference between them. So what is the difference? You know, headline inflation is inflation with food inflation. It is inflation with food inflation. And core inflation is inflation without, यहाँ पे with है ना, लिखिए आप लोग, मैं लिखवा रहा हूं. हेडलाइन इन्फ्लेशन इज इन्फ्लेशन विथ फूड इन्फ्लेशन and core inflation is inflation without food inflation, right? One is inclusive of food inflation, the other is not inclusive of food inflation. So we can say that difference between headline inflation and core inflation. Mathematically, this is how we write difference between headline inflation and core inflation. So headline inflation and core inflation, difference between them is that of food inflation, isn't it? है ना? HI minus CI is equal to FI. Headline inflation minus core inflation is equal to food inflation. So if I say that headline inflation in India is 7%, है ना? And core inflation is 5%. If headline inflation is 7%, that is inclusive of food inflation, and core inflation exclusive of food inflation is 5%, that implies that food inflation in our country is 2%. है ना? Food inflation is 2%. You got the idea? समझ रहे हो आप लोग? है ना? तो ये इक्वेशन जो है बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, इससे आप दूसरा का भी वैल्यू निकाल सकते हैं ना. लाइक हेडलाइन इन्फ्लेशन वुड बी व्हाट? इट इज इक्वल टू कोर इन्फ्लेशन प्लस फूड इन्फ्लेशन, और कोर इन्फ्लेशन वुड बी इक्वल टू हेडलाइन इन्फ्लेशन माइनस फूड इन्फ्लेशन. आप एक ही को याद रखो, दूसरा आप आसानी से डिराइव कर सकते हो. लेकिन ये इक्वेशन जो है बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है, एग्जाम में यहाँ से क्वेश्चंस आएंगे ही आपके, है ना. ये चलिए, तो क्यों हम लोग यहाँ पे फूड इन्फ्लेशन को इंक्लूड करें, यहाँ पे नहीं कर रहे हैं? इनफैक्ट मैं आपको बताऊं कि हेडलाइन इन्फ्लेशन जो है इट इज इन्फ्लेशन विथ फूड एंड फ्यूल इन्फ्लेशन. इसमें फूड और फ्यूल दोनों का इन्फ्लेशन है ना. इट इज इंक्लूसिव ऑफ फूड एंड फ्यूल इन्फ्लेशन. core inflation is without food and fuel inflation, right? We have neither the prices of food grains nor the prices of fuel in the calculation of core inflation, but when we calculate the headline inflation we take into consideration the prices of both food grains as well as fuel, है ना. आगे समझ में आपको? So why this is being done here? Why in the calculation of core inflation prices of two articles are not being included, and here we include the prices of even these two articles? So in fact, in the calculation of headline inflation, you know, every kind of articles are being considered, है ना. In the calculation of headline inflation, every kind of articles are being included, whether the articles are volatile by nature, their prices are volatile, or their prices are not so much volatile. All articles are being considered here. You can see that, you know, food and fuel are something whose price keeps on fluctuating widely, and they are very volatile by nature, and as compared to other articles their price keeps on fluctuating much and more, and so they are volatile items. In the calculation of headline inflation, even those articles are being considered whose price are volatile by nature, whose price keeps on fluctuating, but not in the calculation of core inflation. You can see that in the calculation of core inflation we have left out the calculation of, you know, the prices of food articles and fuel because their price keeps on fluctuating, है ना. तो ये सिंपल सा आपको फंडा याद रखना है कि अगर हम हेडलाइन इन्फ्लेशन को निकालेंगे विल कंसीडर एवरी काइंड ऑफ आर्टिकल, है ना, volatile as well as non volatile. But in the calculation of, you know, core inflation, only those articles are being considered whose prices are stable by nature, है ना, whose price do not fluctuate that much, and that is the reason we live here the prices of food grains and fuel. आगे समझ में? So अब आप मेरे को बताइए कि what kind of inflation is going to be more stable? What kind of inflation would be more stable, headline inflation or core inflation? Yes, core inflation is more stable than headline inflation. Are you getting this point? core inflation is more stable, but headline inflation is more comprehensive than core inflation. है ना, लिख लो, core inflation is more stable than headline inflation. Core inflation is more stable than headline inflation, but headline inflation is more comprehensive than core inflation. ठीक है. Now we'll see what kind of economies consider the inflation, or what kind of economies reflect their inflation using the headline, and what kind of economy represent their inflation using core value. And what does India do? हमें ये देखना है, हम अपने इन्फ्लेशन को हेडलाइन से रिप्रेजेंट करते हैं या कोर से करते हैं, है ना. सो इनफैक्ट दिस कोर इन्फ्लेशन इज मोर रेलेवेंट फॉर रिच एंड एडवांस कंट्रीज, एंड हेडलाइन इन्फ्लेशन इज मोर रेलेवेंट फॉर कंट्रीज लाइक इंडिया, है ना, पुअर एंड डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज, राइट. सो ऑल पुअर एंड डेवलपिंग कंट्रीज रिप्रेजेंट देयर इन्फ्लेशन यूजिंग हेडलाइन इन्फ्लेशन, right, and rich and advanced countries represent their inflation using core inflation. Why this is so? So when I say that advanced countries represent their inflation using core inflation, that means in the calculation of their inflation we don't find the mention of prices of food articles and fuel. They simply do not consider the prices of food articles and fuel in the calculation of their inflation, isn't it? And when we represent our inflation using the headline value, that means there is inclusion of prices of these two even, right? We include the prices of food grains as well as fuel. So why this is so? Why advanced countries do not consider the prices of food and fuel? What is the reason? Hmm. 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 Yes, very good. In fact, advanced countries have, very high per capita income with them, है ना? And if your per capita income is very high, that means you are spending a very small amount of money on essential commodities like food grains and fuel, है ना? You are not worried about their prices, right? Even though their prices increases by 5% or 6%, you are not worried as your income is sufficient enough, है ना? So that's not going to be a big concern in those economy if the prices of food articles and fuel increases. The government is not that much concerned, as the government is aware that people do have sufficient income and they can easily afford the increase in prices of food and fuel. So they do not take into consideration the prices of these volatile goods in the calculation of their inflation. But poor countries and developing countries, where large chunk of people are leading their lives below poverty line, right? There is massive unemployment in the economy. There is cases of malnutrition, right, and starvations. So we simply cannot ignore the impact of increase in prices of food grains and fuel, है ना? That impacts the lives of large chunk of people. So we cannot simply be oblivious of their prices. We have to take into consideration the prices of food articles. Per capita income is very low, and as a result of which we spend a major fraction of our income on the purchase of essential commodities, right? And in that situation we simply cannot be oblivious of the prices of all these essential commodities. So there is, a massive protest in the economy if their price increases abnormally in our economy, right? You may have seen that when prices of essential commodities like some potato or tomato increases, that find places in the front page of our national newspaper. फ्रंट पेज, है ना? फ्रंट पेज में हम लोग लिखते हैं कि टमाटर के दाम बढ़ गए, टमाटर का हम फोटो भी बना देते हैं. लुक एट दिस इज द आर्टिकल whose price has increased, है ना? We give that much of importance to increase in prices of food articles. Not America. अमेरिका का फ्रंट पेज में वो डिस्कस नहीं हो रहा. अमेरिका का फ्रंट पेज में फॉरेन पॉलिसी डिस्कस हो रहा है ना, कि सीरिया में वो क्या करने वाला है, ईरान के साथ अभी वो कैसे न्यूक्लियर डील करेगा. यूक्रेन के साथ उनकी क्या पॉलिसी होगी, रसिया के साथ वो कैसे लड़ेगा, है ना. सच थिंग्स आर बीइंग डिस्कस्ड इन द फ्रंट पेज एंड एडिटोरियल पेज. But when there is increase in price, spike in price of all these vegetables in our country, they find their places in the front page, in the editorial page, and there is discussion in parliament also. There is discussion in parliament also. Why this is so? Because the increase in price is going to impact large number of people in our country. So political parties need to discuss them in the parliament. है ना, आ रहा समझ में आप लोग को. तो इसलिए हम लोग क्या करेंगे, हम लोग हेडलाइन इन्फ्लेशन से अपने इन्फ्लेशन को रिप्रेजेंट करेंगे. बट दोज कंट्रीज हुज इनकम इज सफिशिएंट, दे simply ignore the impact of increase in prices of food articles and fuels, and they do not take into consideration their prices in the calculation of inflation. So one is relevant for advanced countries, other is relevant for countries like India and poor countries, right? But that doesn't mean we cannot calculate them, है ना. अमेरिका भी दोनों को कैलकुलेट कर रही है, हम लोग भी दोनों को कैलकुलेट कर रहे हैं. बट व्हेन इट टाइम्स टू ऑफिशियली अनाउंस द रेट ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन, इट्स नॉट ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ कोर इन्फ्लेशन दैट वी रिप्रेजेंट. We announce the headline inflation. Like today, if inflation rate is 7%, that includes the prices of food grains as well as fuel, है ना. आगे समझ में. So we are done with the classification of inflation event. We have classified inflation on the basis of causes of inflation, rate of inflation, and then on the basis of inclusion and exclusion of commodities, right? So thus we have various kind of inflation. One is called demand pull inflation, then we have the cost push inflation, then mild inflation, galloping inflation, headline inflation, core inflation, hyperinflation, right? आगे समझ में. चलिए, कुछ पूछना है तो पूछ सकते हैं आप लोग. Now time is up. You can ask me the questions if you have any doubt. चलिए, विल कंटिन्यू विद दिस चैप्टर, है ना. कल भी हम लोग इसको कंटिन्यू करेंगे एंड कल ये आपका कंप्लीट हो जाएगा इन्फ्लेशन. ठीक है. थैंक यू.